Welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Our podcast today is with Lindsay. She's a Canadian nurse living in Mexico. That's literally her Twitter bio name is Canadian Nurse Living in Mexico. And I wanted to have Lindsay on to talk about her experience as a Canadian retiree, I guess you could say, a retired nurse living in Mexico. I think it's a very relatable situation for a lot of our listeners, and looking forward to hearing from Lindsay. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Where in Mexico are you based? Where are you calling in from today?
So we're in a very small agricultural town called Mascota. Literally translated means pet, and it's in the
Uh-huh.
state of Jalisco, which is we're about an hour and 45 minutes or 100 kilometers southeast of Puerto Vallarta in the mountains, in the Sierra Madre Mountains.
Okay, I'm whipping out Google Maps, as I'm sure the audience is, to see where Mascot is. And
Not sure I wanted
how?
to tell people where we are because it's kind of it's a hidden gem. So
No, they'll have to battle past the cartel they get to you. So I think you're safe.
you're not lying.
And I would love if we could just get like a sort of 60-second version of how you decided to leave Canada and how you chose Mexico. And we'll go into way more detail
For
over
sure.
the next 45 minutes or so, but just give us like a quick high level.
Yeah, well, COVID. Mexico is always our retirement plan. I was a palliative nurse, visiting home nurse, 15 years emerged before that. COVID came about. I was an essential worker, and then the mandates came about, and I said no, thank you to the shots, and we moved up our retirement plans by about 5 years, and realized that things weren't going in the direction that we wanted in Canada, and we literally escaped. We sold everything and got on a plane on October 29th of 2021. Got out of the country just in time, and ended up in Bucerias, and then realized that we didn't want to throw money away on renting. So we looked for a place, and somehow the planets aligned, and we ended up here in
So
the
you bought a
town that we're
place.
currently in.
So
Sorry?
you bought the place.
We did. We purchased. I know I look at a lot of the things that you post on X, and because we're older. My husband's 60, and he had been retired for a year before I had retired. He worked at the beer store. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the beer
Hell yeah,
store.
I'm Canadian. I'm
Yeah,
Canadian.
yeah. Well, not every Canadian is aware of it, right? Unless you're from Ontario or
Okay,
certain
okay.
parts of Alberta do distribution there. So he had retired after 38 years at the beer store. And when I found out that I couldn't get a job as a nurse of 22 plus years without a COVID shot, that's when we decided we wanted roots. We found it that some of the places we're not huge ocean and sand people. We don't like snow, and we like uh, the laid back concept of where we are. So not being by the beach is actually a benefit for us. Prices are a little bit cheaper, and
Sure.
and I mean, this is not a tourist town. Well, it is a tourist town.
I'm
It,
checking the. Is it tourist? Yeah, tell me.
so it is a tourist town for Mexicans. A lot of
Mm.
Mexicans come here from Guadalajara and uh, Puerto Vallarta to escape the heat of the summer.
Hmm.
We have a lot of racers here. Now, I don't know where you're based. Are you in Mexico City?
I'm in Mexico. I'm not in Mexico City. And
Okay.
I was just looking at the Mascota elevation, and it says about 1,200 meters,
Yep.
which is great. That's like perfect,
Perfect temperature.
perfect elevation where it's, I guess maybe 27 during the day and then maybe like 17 at night, perfect for
Yeah.
sleeping. And that's to grow coffee. It has to be between 1,200 meters and 2,000 meters for like
Yep.
really good coffee. So you're right in that coffee zone.
Well, as a matter of fact, it's funny you should mention that because the lady that's oh, she's sitting out in my front porch. Ladies that's here with her dog who helps us with a lot of things. She's helped us with CFE. She's helped us get our driver's license and whatnot. They actually live at 5,000 feet, and I use feet because a lot of the people that we know here are American. So
Hmm.
we've gone back to a little bit of imperial, but we had a coffee tree in our front, like we're right in the town, but we had a coffee tree in our front courtyard, and we dug it up and gave it to them because it will bear fruit where they are. As a matter of fact, they get frost where they are, and they're about 500 feet higher than we are.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's neat. And yeah, coffee. I mean, and actually in the area, the tourists that come from Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta, they're, like I said, they're escaping the heat, but they come up with their racers. So this is a big racer town in the summer.
What's a racer?
So like a Polaris or a Can-Am, they call them racers here, like the side
Is
by
that a
sides.
motorcycle or a car?
No,
What is
side by
that?
sides, the big four by fours.
Okay,
Yeah,
like an ATV.
yeah, but this isn't an ATV. They're like the size of cars. They're kind of like a cross between a dune buggy and a Hummer.
Okay.
And yeah,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah, yeah. They rent them in Puerto Vallarta, right? Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and they some of the people that we see come up here, they've got like an F-450 and a flatbed and four racers on the back, and they come blowing through our town because we're in the mountains. So, I mean, if you the perimeter of our town, if you start walking uphill, you're going towards the mountains. Like we're right in the middle of a valley. So, um, yeah, we get a lot of racers here, but mostly it's a working class agricultural town. Yeah. So, and we actually found the place online. I was um, looking for places to rent, and then found out how much higher rents have gone up in the course of the time that we had spent 6 months back in Canada, and realized, you know what, we're not planning on going back in Canada. We love the area. We've made friends here. We may as well purchase something. So we did everything that you don't suggest.
No, no, I'm not anti-buying. No, that's great. And no, people can't see the video here, but I can tell it's like sort of a old school Mexican colonial style home, which is that's what I like. That's my
the,
vibe. Like
the
white
beveled
wall,
ceilings. Yeah.
wooden touches,
Oh
tiles.
yeah.
That's my vibe for sure.
Yeah. And we've done it up. Like when we moved in, it was an older couple, gay couple from the States, and one of them had died, and this was their summer home. They had several homes all over the place, and this was their summer home. But it was all painted in like Home Depot builder beige. And it's like, come on, we're in Mexico, and everything is like we've painted everything brilliantly. Like we've got colors we never thought that we'd put together, and just kind of ran with it because you know we're the new we're the new non Mexicans in town, and
Hmm.
you know everybody's interested in. We had a drone flying over our backyard when we were building our pool. Actually, it was kind of funny. So it's like, yeah, yeah, it's and I think it was just a matter of curiosity. But now that we couldn't have found a better place.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I was just curious. So you're from Ontario? Would you mind saying where? I'm just kind of curious if you're like a city person or.
Yeah, so originally I was born and raised in Barrie, Ontario.
Okay.
My parents were divorced, and my dad lived in Toronto most of the time. So we would be between Barrie and Toronto for years and years and years. And then when I met my husband, he's a later life. We're not each other's first spouses. But I moved to Aurelia because I worked in Aurelia. I don't know if you're familiar
Uh-huh.
with where Aurelia
Yeah, it's
is.
like up kind of near Barrie, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's about 20 minutes north of Barrie. I had already worked in Barrie or excuse me, in Aurelia. and commuted. So we moved to Aurelia, about 33,000 people. So this town has about 9,000 people. So it's a much smaller town from what we're used to, but that's okay. I like that very much. We go to PV usually once a month. I mean, let's be honest, they got a Costco there. Um, so yeah, we're in PV. We have friends that live in PV, and we're there quite often. So we have the beauty of both worlds, living in a town where we can escape the craziness of the bigger towns, which is
Hmm.
nice if that's what you're looking for, um, as you know.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, so I'm curious. I want to get into a topic that you mentioned in the DMs as we were kind of coordinating this episode. You
Sure.
mentioned I've been here in Mexico long enough that the what do you call it? The honeymoon phase is
Yep.
over, and now the reality is setting in.
Yep.
Expand on that for me.
Sure. So, so some of we have some interesting friends here. Um, and I'll get in. I just want to preface it with that. But sometimes, I guess sometimes some of the people that we've seen, I had friends come down and say, "Oh, I want to live in Mexico," and a couple that have even tried to do it. And then they've run back to Canada because um, I believe wholeheartedly in lower regulation, higher personal responsibility. And sometimes people don't understand that the lower regulation has to be inversely variable with more personal responsibility. And I don't think people realize that freedom like that isn't free. You really, like, you can't walk down a Mexican sidewalk wearing flip-flops with your head down texting, because like, you have to be responsible for yourself, because nobody else is going to be responsible for it. And I think as Canadians, we are so coddled. Well, I can drink the water because I know I pay taxes and the government is taking care of me. Here, it's like, okay, so they say our water is potable in our house. So it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to believe the government, or I'm not going to believe SAPM, or the water supply company. I'm going to sip at it and make sure I'm okay. I'm going to make ice out of it and make it okay. So there are no assumptions, and I think that's kind of what I mean by rose-colored glasses, or the honeymoon has come off. Because when you first get here as a Canadian, it's like, oh my God, it's so free. You can do whatever you want, which is true. Just don't get caught. But I think you have to you have to realize that with that, the kind of hands off approach to how things are in Mexico, things also move at a different pace. Things are also very different than they are in Canada. And as soon as you can kind of get through that honeymoon phase where I'm in Mexico, there's no snow, everything's cheaper, all of that, all of the things that we think of as Canadians, it's like, oh, no, no nanny state, no, none of these other things. But then you realize, well, yeah, but there are other responsibilities that are involved in being in a different country. And it's things like getting your driver's license, or these other things that aren't as, oh, don't worry about it, I'll just figure it out on my way. Like, you really do need help, and I think you really do need to listen to other people that have gone through it, whether it's the same journey or not. Any of the people that we've talked to that have moved from Canada or the US to Mexico, no, the precursor, or the what made you come to Mexico, is usually the same thing, but everybody's story is different about how they've gotten to where they are. Because I think it comes into your mind that, well, we've been to Mexico however many times, we love Mexico, love the people, but once you're a resident of Mexico, it's very different from just vacationing in Mexico. And I think it's important to just let go of expectations. You really got to go with the flow. You can't force anything to happen, because it doesn't. Like, I know here, if I'm going to see a naturopath on Monday, and it's like, okay, that's my outing because I never know how long it's going to take. If we're going to go and see the notary, for instance, it's like, it could take a little bit longer. People barely take appointments. Things that the typical Mexican operations are very different than from what they are in Canada. And if you can just let go of your expectations, then everything's great. Really. And I think that that's what I mean by the honeymoon phase is over. When you're here as a tourist, or even here as, like, if you're doing 6 months on, 6 months off, you can do that. Anybody can do that. It's because you're an expat. You're in an expat community where most people speak English, and you can get the food that you want. But when you're truly living a Mexican lifestyle, like, we're in a town where everything shuts down at 2 o'clock and doesn't open up again until 4, maybe 5, or maybe not. So, like, if there's something that you really need, you have to determine, well, do I really need it? Because I need to get it before 2, otherwise the store may not open up again. It's And I think that the beauty of not being in that, oh yay, Mexico, everything is wonderful and everything is perfect. Not being in that phase, you can be more realistic, and realize also that we don't we don't need nearly as much as we think we do. And sorry, I know I'm kind of talking around it, and I don't know if I have explained to you what I mean, that the honeymoon is over. Um,
I know you mean it's kind of hard to get at.
It's really hard to
Um,
get at. It's a great place, but it has its. I love Mexico, warts and all. That's the best way to say it, because it's not the perfect place on earth to live. It's not. There's no perfect place on earth. You have to
mhm.
change yourself in order to, not change yourself, change your response to things, and just that response versus reaction. I see so many people at, like, when we go to Costco, and women rolling their eyes. Oh, it's so slow here. It's like, what else have you got to do? I mean, relax, chill, because you bitching about it isn't going to make anybody move faster. It's I don't know. We do. My husband used to build a lot of stuff, and he gets frustrated with the building here. Of course, he's 60, and he said, I'm never ever going to work with concrete again. And then, of course, we moved to the land of concrete. So anything that we need to build, you got to go through concrete, and whatever. Um, but you don't have to deal with trade unions. You don't have to deal with a plumber saying, "Well, I can't do my job because the framer hasn't finished yet." Right. So although things may move slower, it it's just different. It's so hard to explain that the frustration of living in this country is so much less than what it was in Canada. People talk about how things do move slower, and Mexico is so backwards, and it's like, yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with having to have paperwork instead of everything being done digitally. So I think, as a Canadian, you have to let go of all of the things that you expect our government to do, or expect what your life is going to be like, because it's completely different, and you can choose to go with it, that freedom, but also increase personal responsibility, or you can bitch and complain about it and be as miserable as you were in Canada, just without any snow or Trudeau. So,
So let me ask you this. If the cost
sure.
of living was the exact same, Canada and Mexico, price was no option, would you still choose Mexico?
Yes, yeah, I would. Um, for many, 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 many reasons. Food, for one. It sounds silly, but I've talked to many different people, and a couple people in agriculture here, and although they do still use pesticides in Mexico, they don't use Monsanto. They banned Monsanto from the country. They don't use glyphosate. Um, I know my food is coming within at least 100-kilometer radius, if not from my own backyard. Um, the it's funny because you talk about, the 15-minute cities that are coming to Canada, and it's like I chose to live in a 15-minute city because that's what it is. It's all about walkability here.
Hmm.
My car, and see, that's hard to say because cost of living. One of the things that we don't think of as Canadians is how much we actually need as Canadians to survive through the winter, right? Think about all of those things like coats and boots and heating, and so to compare cost of living to Mexico to cost of living in Canada, our needs are so different, right? Like, we're lucky enough to be where we are that we don't need heat or air conditioning. Most we've had a lot of guests, a lot of company come from Canada, and they're like, "Oh my God, you don't have air conditioning?" It's like, well, we don't need it where we are. There are maybe 3 weeks out of the year where it's crazy hot, and you just get more fans. But so cost of living, it's kind of like comparing apples to oranges. Um, Housing costs. I mean, how housing can be it can be as expensive to live in Mexico as it is in Canada. Anywhere on the coast that's touristy, or expat communities are just as expensive as they are in Canada. We found out that if we want to eat like Canadians, the food is just almost as expensive. Like, you go to Costco and buy a pack of 3 rib steaks, it's exactly the same cost in Mexico as it would be in Canada. Or going to Costco to buy a couch, it's pretty much the same cost as it is in Canada. Um, so there are certain things here, like electronics. I don't know if you've noticed, phones, TVs are cheaper, but telephones, for some reason, like cell phones, are more expensive here. And whether that's, I don't understand the whole, trade with Taiwan and China and Mexico. I haven't gotten into that. I'm still trying to learn off by heart 13 states because I've been living here for 2.5 years. I should know 13 states of Mexico. Um, but anyway, long story even longer. Yes, I would still live in Mexico if the cost of living was exactly the same. Absolutely, there's more opportunity here. Um, there's there. I mean, somebody can sit in their house and make up enough agua fresca for the day, and then come home with enough money to be able to feed their family. They don't have to worry about, like the your you can eat tacos out of the back of a truck, and that person is going to go home and provide for their family. And if you get sick from those tacos from the back of your taco truck, it's like, well, you're the one who decided to eat tacos out of the back of a taco truck. Like, it's yeah, it's really hard to describe to non uh,
Hmm.
uh, people that haven't done it. I would absolutely pay the same to live in Mexico as I would in Canada.
Hmm.
Yep.
I'll tell you something. I have multiple cousins that are nurses in Canada,
Hmm.
and it's a tough grind, right? Like,
It
it
is.
does
Yep.
not pay very well. Expectations are very high.
Yep. Yep. And I mean, I've had a lot of people ask me, oh, would you get your license and work in Mexico? It's like, nope. Couple reasons. I don't need to. And I'm very grateful for that. And the life that my husband and I are living here, we do it in a sense that we don't have to work. So if we find that things are a little bit tight one month, okay, so we're gonna, you know what, we'll eat tacos instead of going to Costco and buying rib steak, right? It's so I don't have to go back to work, but if I did, I probably wouldn't do it here because, see, I find that um, I'm not going to take a job away from someone who needs it, first of all, because I don't need my job. So for me to go, oh, I need to get out and do something, well, I'm going to find something else to do, whether it's all the other stuff that I'm learning to do, like make soap and sourdough bread and, all different tinctures of stuff. I've done more with my life in the last 3 years, I think, that I've ever done for myself.
Hmm.
And having the opportunity to do that here, um, as a nurse, you're the last person on your list of who to take care of. And being here and having the ability to be here in the capacity that we are, now it's time for me to take care of myself. And every morning when I wake up and look at that sun, or look at where I am, or see the smiles on the people walking by me, that's worth it to me. That money can't buy that.
I'm curious about social life. I've noticed from a lot of expats, especially older expats, really at every age, honestly, that they say that their social life skyrockets when they leave Canada and move to Mexico because it's so hard to get a group of 5 people in Canada together,
Yeah,
and it's like it's a whole thing.
it is.
What's been your experience from a social life perspective?
Well, interestingly enough, when we got here, and we ended up buying, when we bought the house, the real estate agent that we used, she's an expat from Quebec. And when we met her, we were looking at a house in Bucerius. And we got to talking, because this was back in early 2022, I think. So we got to talking about, because we were still in the midst of all of the you know COVID crap. And her and I started talking and realized that we were very much on the same page with a lot of things. And we kept in touch, even though we didn't want the house in Bucerius. We kept in touch, and she helped us with this house. And had said, essentially, that she told us it's such a beautiful place and all this stuff. And I lost your question. I do that a lot. I'm sorry.
Social life.
Social life. Thank you. Yeah. So when we started researching the town a little bit, just did a kind of a Google search, Mascota, a link. I think it was My Mexican Experience, or one of those. There are a whole bunch of different links and services for expats coming to Mexico. I found that a lot of those links that you can find on Facebook or whatnot, they really more cater to the expat that wants to live in an expat community.
This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Crema Social. Crema Social is like TikTok for international dating. It's an app you can download right now on your phone, and 3 out of 4 people on Crema are single women. The app was founded in Colombia, so unsurprisingly, there are a lot of Latinas on the app, by the way. So how does it work? Crema Social is a social meal experience where you invite a hot girl for a lunch date via video call and food delivery. New concept, so you'll have to try it out for yourself, but this is probably the best way to meet Latinas before you visit the country. So if you're in Latin America or planning to visit Latin America, download Crema Social now and start getting dates right away. There will be a link in the description to download, or just search Crema Social on your favorite app store. Have fun, guys. This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by BitRefill. BitRefill is the best way to spend your crypto in Latin America. Purchase gift cards or mobile refills from more than 3,500 brands in 186 countries instantly, safely, and privately. You can also apply the code MyLatinLife at checkout to get 10% back on your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Job Stacking. If you are a remote or hybrid worker looking to maximize your earning potential, then Rolf Holtze, the author of Job Stacking, guarantees you'll be able to double your income. This is the exact system Rolf has used to take his own income and those of many others beyond $20K a month. So what is job stacking? It's this idea of working multiple remote jobs. You might have heard Rolf, he's worked 5, 7, even 9 remote jobs at the same time before. And by the way, job stacking works equally well for non-technical roles. So no, it's not just for the nerds. So if you're ready to job stack, then book a discovery call with Job Stacking and see how they can double your income in just 9 weeks. In the show notes in the description, there will be a link where you can book a call directly on the Calendly of Job Stacking and be talking with them as early as tomorrow about how to double your income as quickly as possible.
So here, not being an expat community, I Googled the town and it ended up that there was a couple that had moved from Boise, Idaho, that kind of decided. I listened to their story on YouTube and ended up contacting the woman saying, we just moved here. We're not American. We're from Canada. We met for lunch one day, and then they ended up introducing us to a whole bunch of their friends that they have met now. So we've got now, it's funny because when we first got here, we commissioned a local to make us some stools for an outdoor table. And my husband said, I want 10 stools. And I said, but, hon, we don't even know 10 people. And I said, how about six? And he said, no, 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 I want 10. And it's like we ended up having to buy more because now we have more friends. and
Oh,
and they're from all walks of life. Like our two friends they're in their 50s. They're from Boise and they just wanted to get out of the rat race. Another friend, a group of friends, lady here with her, oh my God, her 14-year-old dog that's blind, deaf, and has diabetes. And she's buying insulin for this dog. It's insane. But anyway, she's she's from Guadalajara normally, or normally from she was born and raised in Guadalajara. Her husband was from Texas, decided to leave it all behind when he was 40. He's now 78, and they met in the marina in the Bahia de Banderas. Met in the marina there. He never left. So this is another set of our friends. My husband's a woodworker, and her husband's a woodworker. So we've really connected, and I think that so now we've got quite a group of friends. First Tuesday of every month, my friend Susan comes down and we book a massage. So the massage therapist comes to my house and she gives me a massage and Susan a massage and my husband a massage, and then she's on her way, and then we have dinner and have a couple drinks and hit the pool and off to bed. So we have a much more active social life, and I think also, I mean, there's an element of friendship based on proximity and or the things that people have in common. Like I find in Canada that you make friends based on proximity, and then you just kind of try and tease out things that will enable you to remain friends. Here, it's kind of like, well, and the other thing about moving to Mexico is I've had more of an awakening myself. I used to be gray, alcoholic, stressed. I've started doing yoga, meditation, eating healthy, quit drinking, quit smoking, all in the time since I've been in Mexico. And I know that I have had the opportunity to do that because I didn't have a job to go to anymore, first of all. But what a wonderful opportunity to do that. I feel like I'm, without sounding, never mind, I don't care. I'm not censoring my speech. I feel closer to God here.
I
I
mean, it makes
really
sense.
do.
It's a more natural experience. Like you go outside and it's like you got the palm trees
Yeah,
and the birds are chirping. It's great.
I'm touching grass every day and getting 50% of my nutrients from the sun, right? Like it's and I think that if you, as a Canadian, if you take your Canadian problems with you to Mexico, they will manifest as problems. You gotta, I had an interesting two interesting quotes. One of them, one person said to me, shrug off your Canadian skin. And it was like, so all of the problems you brought with you or that you were trying to escape from in Canada, let them go. Because if you bring them to this country, they will follow you wherever you go. And that's not that's not about oh, I got to leave Canada because of this, this, and this. It's a matter of what kind of life do I want? And what I found was in Canada, I was not allowing myself to have the life that I wanted. Um, and it's really hard to do. Here, it's easy to do for me. Like I said, I'm close. I feel like I'm closer to God. There was a thunderstorm the other day, and it sounded like it was right. The thunder was like right outside our house. Like it scared me. And then it's like, wow, I feel closer to nature. I feel closer to God. Now, is that because of where I am or because I've embraced all of the changes in my life that were given to me because I moved to this country? Sound I know it sounds all kind of peace, love, and macrame, but that's how I feel. And would I've had that opportunity in Canada? I don't know. I didn't give myself that opportunity in Canada because it's really hard to get there. It's really hard to get to personal peace in a country where you're inundated with fear and anger. That's my thoughts. So,
Well, you look healthy, radiant skin.
oh, thank you. I've also, the other piece too is that because not everything is here, right? Everything in Canada is so convenient, right? You can, oh, I want this, or even Amazon. You can get it like that Amazon Prime here. I don't know why. I know why I subscribe to a Prime membership. And I hated Amazon in Canada, but here it's kind of like, ugh, I kind of got to use Amazon, or, I got to use Walmart, and I hate to. And there's certain things in Mexico. Everybody asks me, what do you miss most about Canada? Well, my daughter and pickles. They can't do pickles in Mexico to save their life. They're awful. Pickles are awful. So I started making my own, right? Same with bread, making soap, making lotions, all of these things that I never had the opportunity to do when I was working. But also now I know what's going onto my body, onto my skin, into my body. And I think when we are in and we have the opportunity to do that here, because like I remember you could buy like homemade soap in Canada, it's like $12 a bar. It just cost me a grand total of about $2 to make 8 bars of soap here, and it's better quality, and I know it's going on my skin. So the more the less processed, the less regulations of stuff. Like I'll have to send you this video, and I don't know if you'll want to share it or not, but in our town in the morning, there's two brothers. So when you come into our town, you come in from the 544, which is it's the highway to get from Puerto Vallarta to Mascota. This road didn't exist 20 years ago.
Hmm.
Imagine that. Like you've got a town of
Yeah,
9,000 people.
Vallarta's new. It's a new place.
Yeah. So the only way you could get to Mascota was either by four-wheeler or if you came by Guadalajara. So um, anyway, at in the morning, at the entrance of the town and the exit of the town, because our town is like this. It's like a little the you have to go through our town to get from Puerto
Right,
Vallarta
it's like
to
roadside.
Guadalajara. You have to, unless you take the toll route. Anyway, so there are these two brothers, and they have goats. So in the morning, they load up their goats in their truck, and they put out a table, and they have raicilla, chocolate milk powder, and coffee and sugar. And you go and get a cup and you fill it up with however much of those things that you want, the raicilla, the chocolate powder, coffee. You bring it over to the guy, and he milks warm, fresh goat milk into your coffee, and you walk away with it. And when the goats are empty, the brothers go home, and they do that every single morning in this town, and there's lineups for it. Like,
It's pretty
it's
cool.
wild. And the just talking about again the regulations, like there's nowhere in Canada or the US where you would see that, right?
Hmm.
Regulations on raw milk, or you don't have a liquor license to give that
Right.
raicilla. It's so wild and so different from what we're used to as Canadians. You really just have to go with the flow, because my belief is I came to this country, I'm a visitor in this country, and behind my closed doors, I'm Canadian, but as soon as I step outside of my doors, I'm going to follow the customs and the culture of the town that I belong to. Um, One of the things that happened when we were first here is during Independence Day, they do a call to arms. It's a very, very traditional small Mexican town where we are. So they do a call to arms every Independence Day where each
Just coming up, by the
neighborhood.
way.
What's that?
It's coming up in about 2 weeks,
I
September
know, I know.
15th.
I'm really looking forward to chili nogales. They're the
Mm.
oh, it's so good, so good. I got to learn to cook it myself. But um, so the call to arms, each neighborhood goes around and they march around in the street, and we meet at the Catholic Church to say, if we're ever invaded, this is our town. We will take up arms to defend our home. And like the center of town is where everybody meets. It's my sister lives in Fernie, BC, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with where that is, but it's a small mountain town, three hours due west of Calgary, and it's
Yeah, yeah, it rings a bell. It's near Revelstoke.
pretty close. Yeah, like I
Yeah.
mean, it's yeah. Anyway, her and my brother-in-law came for a visit early last year, and he said our town reminded him of what Fernie was like 40 years ago.
Mm.
You walk down the street and um, people say hello, buenos dias. Of course, I've been caught many times, buenos dias, and they go buenas tardes. And it's like, oh shit, right? I can never remember when that changeover is. And it's noon, by the way. If you say buenos dias
Aha.
after 12 noon, you'll be corrected, or at least I am.
Aha.
Mind you, I've
Aha.
made it pretty clear to most of the townspeople that if I make a mistake with Spanish or the customs, please correct me, because my belief is I'm a visitor. I'm not going to go out and say, "Oh, I wish this town had a McDonald's," or "I wish there was a Starbucks." I mean, they just built a bodega orare. Is that how you pronounce it? Orare? The bodegas, like the bodega that Walmart owns,
Okay.
the stores. They just opened one here a couple months ago, and the townspeople were like, "We don't want big business in this town." And it's so funny because they want to maintain the very colonial type town that it is.
Hmm.
And I want the locals here to make sure they know that I do as well.
For sure.
I didn't come here to try and change it to what I was used to in Canada, and I think that some Canadians can fall into that.
Speaking of colonial towns, I randomly had a star on my Google Maps for a town right near you called San Sebastian.
Yep.
Is that like another cute colonial town or Pueblo Mágico?
So interestingly enough about that town, you ask any of the locals about San Sebastian, because it is a pueblo mágico, and as is our town. And I say it's like, everybody seems to know about San Sebastian, but they don't know as much about Mascota. And the locals will say they have a better advertising campaign. So we've been through San Sebastian. It's the kind of raicilla capital. If and not many people who come to Mexico they're all familiar with tequila, but not many are familiar with raicilla. And essentially, right? Do you know what raicilla is?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay, so raicilla
Is
is
it RIC?
Racillia,
Uh-huh.
raicilla. So it's an agave-based alcoholic spirit, and it's it can only be called raicilla if it's made in Jalisco, and because Jalisco is where the agave that makes the raicilla is made,
Hmm.
just like mezcal, or technically tequila. Um, anyway, so it's the we have a board of raicilla here. This is San Sebastian is the capital of raicilla making in Jalisco, and I think that's probably why it's much more well known. But one thing, if you're interested in kind of smaller towns and learning a little bit more about them, Talpa de Allende is very well known for pilgrimages around Semana Santa.
Hmm.
And it's a town that's about 30 minutes from us. And they had last year during Semana Santa, this is a town of about 15,000 people. During Semana Santa, they had 1.8 million visitors to this town because they have they have a church, and this is the
1.8
church is
million.
1.8 million. They do 95% of their economy during Semana Santa. It's wild, and it's a pilgrimage, and a lot of people will do the pilgrimage from Puerto Vallarta right to Talpa, and they'll walk it, and you'll see people walking along the 544, which is the highway. And this highway is not like the 400. This is more like the highway going through Golden. Like this, the 544 is pretty treacherous. You don't drive it at night. There's livestock. There's rock slides. Well, you don't drive at night in Mexico anyway.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, it's not a good idea to drive in rural Mexico at night. And people say, oh, why? Because of the banditos? It's like, no, because of the cows on the road. You don't want to hit a cow on the road. Not only does it total your car, but there's some real legal ramifications to hitting and killing livestock on the road. So there are a lot of things that you learn and you think, oh my God, why do they do that? And then it's like, oh, I understand why they do that. So I think just letting go of your expectations of what things are supposed to be like and go with the flow. And like I said, it's not going back to the honeymoon thing. It's not a perfect place to live, but it's perfect for me right now.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, it must have that charm then if it's a Pueblo Mexico. So
it
that's great.
really does. It's the town square. I'll have to. I'll send you a picture of a friend of ours. Actually, he was born and raised kind of. Well, he was born kind of in this area. He was. There's a town called Volcanas, and yes, it is a town called, literally translated, volcano. Not that far from us, and that's where he lived there up until he was 5, and then moved to San Francisco. And him and his wife retired at 50 and moved here to Mascota. He's a friend of ours, and he actually mans the bells at the Catholic Church. So they're all on timer now, but he's in charge of the bells. And of course, the church overlooks the town square, which is quite common in pueblos, in small towns. And he took a bird's eye view picture of the town square, and it's so wild seeing it. They've got these ficus trees that we can only grow inside in Canada. Benjamin is in Canada, and they're in the town square, and they're massive, and you can walk up through there anytime, and there's people sitting there having their lunch, families meeting their families at their lunch break. And that's what's missing. That's what was missing in my life, seeing that camaraderie, family, loving family, doing things with family. And again, I realize that there are issues. You think the guy that built our pool, for instance, I love my family. I'm such a good family man. And it's like, okay, Juan, which family is that? Because we know you have 2 of them, right? So I get that things aren't perfect. The women uh, it's different. Gender roles are very traditional here.
Hmm.
My friend from Boise, Idaho, she came down here tried and true blue Democrat, and moved to Mexico, and realized uh, that there's people don't get divided into those groups, at least in our town. Like, they don't divide people by political affiliation, essentially. Like, you don't know who people are voting for in political parades are big here. But the gender roles, anyone who's freaking out about gender, maybe not a good idea to move to small town Mexico, because gender roles are pretty, they're this town is still 85% Catholic. So anyone who's interested in doing your kind of um, going against more traditional conservative values, it's not frowned upon. It's just not necessarily celebrated here.
Just go to a big city. Don't go to a
Just go to
small
a
town.
big city. Go to Puerto Vallarta, right?
Yeah.
And I don't, and I love Puerto Vallarta. I mean, I we were down there. My friend Susan and I were down there. We were walking along the Malecon, and she's like, "You realize people think we're gay, right?" And it's like, I don't care. I really don't. Like, I, I don't care, because two women walking together, two men walking together in the
It's
romantic
funny.
zone of Puerto Vallarta, it's likely that it is.
That's
But
kind of funny.
I mean, who cares? Um, but it's a very traditional and a very still a very Catholic town with very traditional kind of values. And
Yeah, yeah.
again, these are things. This is the I think that the underlying tone of moving to Mexico from Canada or the US, just check yourself. That's it. Just check yourself. And if you're willing to be open to whatever comes to you, I'm not talking about bad, but don't enforce all of your beliefs coming down here, because people are so accepting and so lovely. And sometimes I wonder, it's like, are you making fun of me in Spanish because I don't speak fluently yet? But you know what? So what if they are? Really? I, I, I think it's like, if they want to make fun of the white lady that wears her, this, I have a bag that says best day ever. And when I got to the airport the last time I came back from Canada, one of the guys says, "Is it the best day ever?" And I said, "You know what? I live in Mexico. Every day is the best day ever." And as long as you continue to look at that, and I do, and you may giggle, or people may giggle, "Oh yeah, it's just nice because you don't have to work." It's like, well, of course it's nice because I don't have to work. But if I was not working and in Canada, I would be worried about how long my money's going to last, if my freedom of speech is going to be taken away from me. Like, I don't have those concerns here. But
Mhm.
I'm also not going to be an asshole, because, sorry, I know you're recording this. Um, because I'm still a visitor in this country, and I can live here nice and freely, and I have the
Mhm.
opportunity to do that. But I also know, and I'm not going all liberal or anything. I also know I have the privilege to be able to do that.
Mhm.
So, um, Canadians and Americans moving down here with Canadian or American money, we do have it a lot better than many Mexicans. And I think, just as a Canadian or as an American coming to Mexico, if that's what you want to do, and if this is where you want to set up your life, um, then you live the way Mexicans live, and that's probably, I think, the most wonderful thing about it. Is in your own home you can live as a Canadian, and you can enjoy the Mexican lifestyle. And I'm just very grateful that we did an immersion sort of thing, and we are in that kind of immersive place versus being in a tourist area.
Yeah, yeah. I think you did a good job, and I think we got to get to wrapping up.
Yep,
But
sorry.
this episode ended up being really, really good. I knew it would be. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, but I really, really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you.
This
I
this is
did.
an awesome episode. We'll have to. I want to do like you know how we do roundtable episodes sometimes. I want
Yeah.
to do I want to do like a retiree roundtable and get
Oh,
like a
I'm in.
couple different. You down for that?
Yeah, for sure. I won't let my husband get on it, because he'll smoke a joint and he'll bogart the whole time. So, but yeah, let me know, and I'll send you that picture of our town and that video through DMs, and see if you want to repost it. I'm happy to do that.
For sure. So we'll
Okay.
link your Twitter in the show notes. Do you want to share any kind of last message, call to action, where people can find you, any of that before we get out of here?
Um, no, I don't think so. I was considering, though, kind of doing a sort of Q&A, for people that have have questions about, medical concerns. And maybe I can talk to you separately on that about that,
Mm.
because being able to provide a service to people as well. I mean, you provide a service to people about, information about stuff like that. And I think part of moving here is, especially if you are retired, and if you're looking for a purpose, I think it's really important because, like, I'm just getting my Latin legs underneath me, if you will, at some point, still being just like, I'm 51, so I'm still relatively young, and thankfully I'm in some of the best shape of my life now. Um, I want to be able to give back. And maybe if there's some other Canadians or Americans, expats that, um, do something to give back, I'd like to hear from them what they do, because the whole dog rescue thing is overdone with Canadians and Americans. Um, anyway, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
No,
I'd
I
like
know
to
it's
connect with others, and
hard to give a concise message to
hard.
end it off, but I think
Yeah,
everything you said, all the advice you gave today was great, and it's just great for people to hear the experiences of normal people that have made the move. So everyone that's kind of thinking of taking the plunge, I'm sure really enjoyed this one, and we'll have to have you back at some point. So thank you so much, Lindsay, for joining us
no
on
problem.
another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Quick note for the audience, wherever you're listening to this, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, please be sure to like and subscribe, comment. We put out 2 episodes a week with amazing guests like Lindsay, and you won't want to miss an episode. Thanks to Lindsay again, and thanks everyone for watching.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Hey guys, quick note at the end of the episode here. If you made it this far, you might be interested in working with My Latin Life personally to make progress on your internationalization plan. So whether the next step for you is getting residency in Latin America, lowering your taxes, choosing the best country, maybe a little birth tourism, whatever the next step is for you, of course, My Latin Life can help. We've helped people in their 20s, their 40s, their 60s, because I truly believe that Latin America has something to offer people at every stage of life. So if you want to become our VIP client, if you want to work with Vance, myself directly, book a call. There will be a link in the description. There will be a small fee for the initial consultation, and we do that to filter out the time wasters and focus on the best of the best clients. But if you're listening to this podcast and you made it all the way through the episode, I know you're the best of the best. But we're ready to work with you. So book that call. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the My Latin Life podcast, and we'll catch you in the next one.